Hello and welcome back to another YTV's Political Roundtable. I'm your moderator, Tommy Atlee. On the left we have Esul Burton. Voicing the opinion of the right we have Zach Young. And in the center, Emil Friedman. Today we'll be talking airstrikes in Syria, the YCC, and of course, political rants. So let's get started with the first question. Recently, opposing op-eds have run into the Yale Daily News questioning the YCC's role. A big complaint is that they don't represent the thoughts and voices of the general student body. In your opinion, does the YCC matter?
Well, I think that the YCC needs to change, right? I think that it can't function as a representative student body, as you said, if the individual members that make up the organization aren't representative of the people that go to this school. But I also found it equally fascinating that the people who were leveraging that attack was the YDN, right? Because I wouldn't say that the editorial board of the newspaper is necessarily representative either, and it's kind of ironic for me to make this statement while at a YDN, TV roundtable, right? But I think that, that's something to sort of think about, and I kind of wonder why it was YDN making those criticisms and not necessarily those criticisms being made publicly by the members of the communities that I think should be voicing them, and why the YCC chose to respond to the criticism by the YDN and yet has largely stayed silent on criticism coming from activists in our community.
Well, here we welcome all criticism, so go at the YDN if you want. Emil, what do you have to comment on that?
Yeah, in the conversations I've had with politically inclined people the last couple of weeks, I think one of the issues is that, especially in the era of Trump, it's hard to justify for a lot of people who have a limited amount of time that YCC is what they want to spend their time on. YCC is a group that advocates basically for the comfort of Yale students. And, I think an issue like making sure that more immigrants don't get deported or protecting women's rights has a little more bang than planning spring fling. And in packed schedules, you have to prioritize. And I think that a lot of people who are potential YCC candidates are looking at it and they're saying, right now there's some things happening that are a little more important than what's happening on campus.
What are your thoughts on the issue, Zach?
Yeah, well, I think two main ones. First is I would actually love to see a real YCC election. Everybody, at least, and I've been here for 4 years, tends to run on the same issues of we want to give students more of a voice, we want better mental health, we want more money, we want more resources, and there's never really a clash of opinions, a debate. And that really does a disservice to the students at Yale, because if you want to actually have a debate and actually feel like your vote will lead to a different set of policies, then I think people might feel more engaged. What we basically have is a one-party YCC. It's a one-party school. It's a one-party state. And so I'm not saying that there needs to be a Republican option, but I think there should at least be an ideological divide between candidates in YCC elections so that there is a meaningful discourse that takes place before elections and that people really feel like there are stakes involved. Are we going to be advocating for or against this? Are there two policies that are at odds? I think that creating that type of discourse would do a huge service. I think the second point, and Emil made it, and I think it's very strong, is that ultimately the YCC today talks a lot about increasing comfort for Yale students. I don't think that's where our time should be, and I don't think it's where money should be, including on Spring Fling, where they keep increasing the funds for that. If YCC wants to become more relevant, what they really need to do is start talking about global issues and talking about ways that Yale can do more in the community.
I guess speaking to that comfort point, which I found really interesting, was that I think that we have really skewed vision of what comfort means to students, because you can easily say it's like having a care package, provided by the YCC, but it's also knowing that your representatives and some sort of student government are protecting your rights to be on this campus, whether it's a visa problem. I think that's a type of comfort too, right? And making sure that in an academic space you are able to take classes, so that the YCC is pushing for professors to come here and teach in areas where you want to specialize in, but because of Yale's lack of faculty diversity, that's not a possibility academically, right?
I want to see the YCC actually do those things. If you look at the platforms of most of the people running, opposed or unopposed, most of them is showing up to different meetings, going to different committees, forming different task groups. There's not a whole lot of money where their mouth is. I want to see some actual progress by the YCC done before they start talking about all this. So yeah, I think a diverse group of representatives is important, but giving them, the ability to actually do something is important too.
Maybe one useful way to actually exercise power for the YCC especially with the rise of Local 33. Now that the graduate students have a union and the faculty have a senate, both of those were created in the past few years, I think the undergraduate students need to make sure that our interests are getting represented within Yale. And so insofar as maybe we should be concerned, and the YCC does particularly have an obligation to undergraduates, I think they actually should take it upon themselves to make sure that with the rise of Local 33, we're still getting shopping period. We're still getting to choose our classes. We still get the kind of flexibility that we've become accustomed to, and making sure that students here who are undergraduates actually get represented at the highest level at this university.
True. Someday one could foresee the faculty senate trying to do away with shopping period. I know I've had countless teachers
They don't like it.
rant against it. Yeah. 59 cruise missiles were fired on a Syrian airfield last Thursday in retaliation for the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons on civilians. What does this strike speak about the United States' involvement in Syria and the Trump administration's dealings with foreign conflicts in general? Zach, would you care to field this question?
Sure. So I think this strike can be thought of on a number of different levels. On the one hand, we could talk about whether it's strategically wise for American interests. On another level, we could talk about whether this represents what Trump has promised to his voters, and whether this does represent an American first type of strike. And third, we could look at it politically. Is this good for the administration? I think in those three are going to lead us to three different answers. Strategically, or let's start on the other end. So, is it politically popular? It actually has been very politically popular. Some Democrats have come out in support. More neoconservative Republicans, who have been some of the most hostile in-party groups to this administration, have been very supportive. And so as a political move, it seems somewhat wise for an administration that's been fledgling to get real accomplishments through. If you look at it, though, more as a strategically or this American first level, I think there's really two ways to interpret it. One is this is President Trump trying to get more leverage so that he can exercise soft power more effectively. If you're trying to threaten North Korea to stop doing nuclear weapons, they have to really believe that you're prepared to use your threats, which you describe at the table, to have a strong leverage position. It's not enough just to say America first all the time and actually expect people to make deals with you. On the other hand, it's a little bit hard to justify where this will lead. What's the exit plan? How could this escalate? And those types of questions.
Esul, did you care to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Zach's latter points about how it is sort of like politically unclear as to like what this is going to entail for America's foreign policy, what's going to entail in terms of like international relations, how we're going to move forward from this. I think one problem that I have with the strike, or the way that the administration has gone about it, is sort of that there was no political philosophy behind it, right? It seemed a little spur of the moment, perhaps in a way of distracting the American audience, the world audience, from like other things that are happening at home. But I think ultimately the administration itself, several different members have come out with vastly different explanations as to why they did it. And so I feel like this was a big step, and it was dangerous taking it if there was no real idea about why we did it and how we can move forward in terms of like strategically.
In your opinion, why do you think the Trump administration called the strike?
I mean, the cynic in me would say that it was to distract people from like the news cycle that preceded it, right, which was like largely negative. And as Zach said, this has become more politically popular than the past actions of the administration, although support among Democrats have been relatively stagnant about military intervention in Syria during the Obama administration and now. But yeah, I think that it seems unclear as to whether Trump's administration has a real strategy moving forward.
Emil, where does the center land on this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree that there's no strategic plan. And yet, to the extent that reality TV show host being a commander-in-chief is comforting, I am comforted by the move, because I think it's the first tangible thing we can see that, in fact, is not really pursuing this, America First policy. And it is a more traditional Republican foreign policy, which, as far as Trump standards, I think is pretty comforting. I would add a word of caution, though, because yes, the strikes are popular, and I agree with them. However, we have to remember that Trump treats incentives like a fourth grader, and that he will learn very quickly, like a child, that bombing stuff makes you popular. Like presidents during war, their approval ratings always go up, and he is struggling right now. And if he learns that this is how you do it, we've got a real problem on our hands. So I also agree with you as far as the Russia focus. It is possible that this was a move coordinated with Russia to distract from the Russia story. And I think it's important for Democrats. I mean, we see these Senate committees, the House committee, the FBI investigation. Like, we need to keep our eye on the ball as far as the Russia investigation and investigating the collusion, potential collusion that happened between Trump and the Russians during the election.
Zach, what do you have to say in response to these two statements?
I think there's a lot of consensus, at least on this issue, which maybe that's good. But I do think, in terms of this idea that there's no strategy, we should distinguish between not necessarily having follow-up strategy in Syria proper and having no foreign policy strategy. I think it's very foreseeable, or at least easy to imply, that the strategy here might be to exercise some force so that you can show other hostile actors like Iran, like North Korea, that when we threaten you or when we come to the negotiating table and say we mean business, that we're taken seriously. And I think this is something that for President Trump's administration, it was a crutch, because he ran off this non-intervention, America First platform. And so if you really want to have strength in your leverage, at some point in your administration, you have to find the right moment. You're going to have to show that you're ready to use force. And this was actually a major problem for the Obama administration, particularly when it tried to negotiate deals like the Iran deal and couldn't get a lot of concessions and ended up finding itself, even though America has a lot of strength, supposedly, making last-minute concessions to keep deals alive, because other actors just didn't really believe that when push came to shove, President Obama would really be willing to escalate a military conflict.
I was just going to add, Trump is hardly the first new president to be tested by adversarial leaders. I think that Assad tested Obama in 2013, and I think many would argue that Obama failed that test. So I think also in terms of our place on the world stage, like you were saying, it showed that this president is willing to use force. Even though he's talked about America first, he still isn't shying away from at least attempting to keep our place as the moral conscience of the world. That's going to be more difficult, but I do think it's a good first step.
Well, I think we have time for one more segment, and we'll give each guest a minute to rant about a topic of their choice. So let's start off with Emil.
Sure. So I want to rant about Jared Kushner. It seems that at this point, Donald has put Jared in charge of fixing the Middle East, reinventing government, and rewriting the tax code, among many other things. And he also has time to go to Aspen on weekends. I want to be clear about two things. Number one, Jared is not qualified for the position. Unlike most people in all administration White Houses, Jared did not work for his place in the White House. He didn't work for his title. He didn't work for his office. His parents bought his admission to Harvard. Okay, after that, everything was given to him, and this position was given to him too. He's not qualified for the position. He is not an ally of the Democrats, is the second point. Democrats look at Jared and Ivanka as like the one, lifesaver in the Trump administration. They're not. If they were lifesavers for the Democrats, they would have made change so far. Ivanka can tweet about equal pay for women and climate change, but if you look at the executive orders that her father has put out, none of them line up. They're not allies of us. They shouldn't be in the White House.
Thanks, Emil. Esul, would you care to do your rant?
Absolutely. So today I'm going to be ranting about, I mentioned this before, but the lack of faculty diversity at Yale. And so I think it's become a really big problem in recent years. We have a ton of faculty leaving for other colleges, either because there's a lack of tenureship opportunities here or because they feel like there's a lack of academic support by the institution. And I think this hurts Yale because, one, we can't be a competitive school in all areas of our curriculum if we don't have the faculty and the courses to demonstrate that sort of intellectual diversity that we're looking for. And second of all, if Yale wants to be this hotbed of interesting scholarship and innovative scholarship and producing the scholars who can do that, then we need to make sure that we have the kind of faculty who are able to mentor those scholars, as opposed to scholars already sort of being shuffled into pre-existing areas of scholarship, and instead of being able to break out and sort of forge a path of their own.
And Zach, what's your rant for this week?
Sure, so I'll take on actually a similar topic to Esul, which is about faculty diversity. However, what I would rant about is I think we have the concept wrong at Yale, and I think that discourse needs to be reshaped. So far when people talk about faculty diversity, they're really talking about racial tokenism, and sometimes to a lesser degree, gender tokenism. I don't think the solution to a better math department or a better history department is just filling a series of quotas with the people of skin color that matches the demographics of the United States. However, what I do think it means is making sure that we have people who represent different experiences, different ideologies, and different ways of approaching problems. At the end of the day, Yale is a research institution. It's supposed to produce world-class scholarship, and it's supposed to educate students. And so we should be looking for and asking ourselves, is, are the faculty having meaningful debates, or are departments becoming echo chambers?
All right, that's all we have for tonight. This has been YTV's Political Roundtable. Thanks.